So you probably clicked on this because you've heard of the new National Association of Realtors big proposed settlement, and you want to know what the heck is going on. You want to know what's in it for you, what's in it for me. How is it going to affect buyers? How is it going to affect sellers? How is it going to affect the industry? All that stuff. So I've been literally getting a dozen text messages, phone calls every single day asking about what this means. And so if you want to end the video right now, nothing is going to change until July. That's when the proposed settlement, even if it gets approved, is actually going to come to fruition. So from now until July, right now, nothing has changed. And I also, before I get into this even more, want to, I don't want to get sued by the lawyers. So just keep in mind, this is not legal advice. This is me. This is my opinions. This is what I've been hearing from other people in the industry, from other people in my brokerage, from people outside of my brokerage. And so this is kind of what's going on. So just keep in mind, it's just my opinion. Please don't sue me. I don't want to hire another attorney. Okay. So I'm going to start off with a brief history of why we even have buyer's agents. So brief history, the buyer's agents in California, as well as the rest of the United States, was a significant change because in the 1980s, the Federal Trade Commission did a study. And what they found out was that most buyers, this is before we had buyer's agents, thought that the person opening the door for them and showing them the property had their best interest in mind. And that wasn't really true, because if somebody hired to sell, if I'm somebody being hired to sell a home, I'm going to get the most price for it that I possibly can with the least contingents as quickly and as fast as possible. So if somebody comes in the door, my obligation is not necessarily for them, but it is for my seller and my seller only. And if they pay too much for the property, that's kind of me doing a great job. So the FTC basically put out that study, and they said that buyers think that they're being represented, and they're really not. So that's when the National Association of Realtors got together and kind of put in a framework so that buyers can have representation too. However, it was considered a huge burden. Think about it. You're saving up 20% for a down payment for a home, and taxes, and whatever points you're paying on your mortgage, and so you have to come up with all that money, and then you have to pay extra for your agent. So they decided that, what if we make it so that buyers can have agents too? And when sellers get their commission, they can use part of that commission to attract other buyers' agents who might have a client that might want their property. So it was like paying and sharing your commission with other agents to maybe expand your network from maybe 12 other brokers or 12 other agents that you're really close with to thousands of brokers and agents that you're really close with. So that was kind of the history of that. And also, just for reference, that was always reasonably transparent. When you look at a listing agreement, it always specifies. It says, this is our fee. And even that's negotiable. Sometimes it's 4%, sometimes it's 6%. 4% people, typically it's like, hey, I'll come in with an iPhone and put a for sale sign on it and throw it on the MLS, and then good luck. The 6% or even 7% guys, they come in with drones and a video crew and a staging crew and a cleaning crew and an air pressure, water. They make your house sparkle, and they charge a little bit more, but they're also going to get more for it. So that was always negotiable. You could always negotiate services and fees, always. So, and that was also on the listing fee, so that's pretty transparent. And even if you look at any of the listing forms, like for instance, if you look at the San Francisco Association of Realtor form, which I'm a part of, it specifies that I am allowed to share this percentage of the commission for the house that I list with another broker if they bring me a client that wants to buy the house, right? So my job is to make the house amazing, to market the property, to get as much attention as I possibly can, make videos, do whatever I can to get attention to it. and also get other brokers to bring their clients that maybe are looking for a property like mine to me. And so I would just split my commission with them. Here, you take half, I take half, everyone's happy. That was also pretty transparent and also negotiable. You didn't have to. You could have said, hey, Tim, I really don't want to offer any other agent's commission. I only want to pay you and you only. And I'd have said, okay, cool, we're going to do that. There might be some consequences. We might not have as many buyers, but we can absolutely do that if that's what you want, Mr. and Mrs. Seller. Or Mr. and Mr. Seller, this is San Francisco, Mrs. and Mrs. Seller. Let's not get into that. Anyway, that was always a thing. It was always transparent, always negotiable. So what this lawsuit alleged was that there was price fixing involved, meaning that we all agreed that none of us will take more or less than a certain amount, which I don't know how they decided that because it's all negotiable. Even all the little forms, like they're not pre-filled in. You negotiate whatever you want. Lack of transparency, again, they said it wasn't transparent. I think maybe sometimes it's a little confusing because I do get people who come to me and are like, hey, Tim, how much will you charge me to represent me in buying a house? And so a lot of these first-time home buyers, they don't even know that the seller usually actually pays for my compensation. So they come to me saying, hey, how much is it going to cost me, the buyer? And I've always had the privilege to say, you don't pay me, the seller pays me. And that's just the way it works. So that's the way it's worked. And that is the part that's going to change. Mid-July 2024, and this is straight out of their proposal, MLS participants working with buyers will be required to enter written agreements. What does that mean? That means that if I am going to show you properties, if I'm going to show you neighborhoods, if I'm going to answer questions, if I'm going to work on behalf of you, then I need to have a contract with you to work with you. So now, I guess it's okay because I'm great to work with, and so that's great. So basically now I have to say, well, my fee is X. We'll see how this goes. I have my fee. If you want to know more about my fee, we can talk about it later. But anyway, that is how it works now. So from now on, I'm going to have a written agreement with you to show you property. I'm going to have a written agreement with you to, help you along your buyer's journey. So that's what they want. They want to make sure that there are written agreements between the buyers and the buyer's agents. So that's a big rule change. Another big rule change is that the seller's agent is not supposed to negotiate what the buyer's commission is. Okay. So usually in San Francisco, it's customary. A discount broker is going to be 4%. A regular broker is going to be 5%. A really hands-on, we'll do everything for you, is 6%. And usually we just split that with the buyer's agent. Well, now we're not allowed to do that. Now I just get it. I can't pay a buyer's broker. I can't. So that's going to be an interesting change. Now it's going to be different. So now the buyer has to pay for their own representation. Now, that's not necessarily stopping a buyer from saying, hey, Mr. Seller, I want to give you $1 million for this house, but I need to pay my agent $25,000 or whatever it is. They can always ask for a seller credit, offer $1,025,000, and then just get that credit to pay the buyer's agent. But now I would say that's a little bit more difficult to explain, but that is going to be where we're at, to where if you do want the sellers to compensate for the buyer's agent, that's how it's going to have to be constructed. Why would you even work with a buyer's agent if a buyer has to pay the buyer's agent? And that's a very good question. And that's something that this lawsuit is going to shed light on. So it's actually great. This is actually part of that transparency. So what is the value add for a buyer's agent? usually is convenience. Usually people who have jobs, who have a family, who have other things that they need to do, they don't necessarily have time to browse 1,000 listings and to search for all these things and go and tour homes to make sure that it's a quiet street or to make sure that the neighbors aren't noisy and all that stuff. Working with a buyer's agent makes buying a home so much more convenient because we can do a lot of those tasks for you. We can organize home tours, and then you have one agent taking you from home to home to home to home instead of the buyer having to call up 7 different agents, making 7 different schedules. It's a mess. So having a buyer's agent can help you, especially when you're new to an area, you're new to a neighborhood, you're new to a city. It can really help you explore and get to know and learn so much more about what's going on. So really, convenience is a big thing. The other thing is you also get a broader selection when you're working with a buyer's agent. And what I mean by that is there's a lot of properties that maybe people don't want to know that are for sale. So maybe it's a politician, maybe it's a celebrity, or maybe it's for personal reasons that we don't want to get into. But there's a lot of reasons why people might want to sell a property, but might not necessarily want it to just go out and everywhere to the public. So even on the MLS, there's a little button that says, do not push to internet. And if they push that button, you're never going to find it. You're never going to find it on Zillow. You're never going to find it on Redfin or any of those sites because it's not on the internet. They don't want this to be public knowledge. But me, as an agent, I have access to it. So you come to me, I can show you properties that aren't on Zillow, aren't on Redfin, aren't on, everybody's individual sites. But there are a lot of people. There's also the situation where, let's just say you want to buy a home in a certain building. And sometimes people just have a lot of these and they want to sell them, but they don't necessarily want them to be on the market. So what I can do is I can call other agents that have a lot of clients that might want to sell, and I can call them up and say, hey, Judy, I have a client looking for this, this, and this is their budget. Do you have anything, or do you know anybody who might be considered selling? And that's how we do off-market transactions. And a lot of those happen. And without working with a buyer's agent, you will never find those. So that's another big value add of having a buyer's agent. Another big value add for a buyer's agent is that you don't have to disclose all your financial information to every single house you want to make an offer on. Think about it. If it's a seller's market and you're getting outbid left and right and you've placed 7 or 8 offers, you're going to have to give your entire financial packet of information to every single agent that you are trying to write an offer on, even if you don't write an offer, because they need to know if you can even take them serious or if they're even going to take you seriously as a buyer. So it makes the buyer's job so much more complicated without an agent because now they have to do so much more work just in writing an offer. Another key point here is just like what they found in the 80s is that most people believe that the agent showing the house has their interest in mind if they buy through them. But that's not necessarily true. Think about it. If you can qualify for a $1.5 million house, but I'm selling a house that's $1.3 million, and you come to me and I represent the seller, you come to me and say, hey, we really want this house. We love it. It's perfect for us. Will you take the list price, $1.3 million? Well, you just told me you qualified for 1.5, and you just told me that this is the best house, and my obligation is to the seller. So why would I say, sure, we'll take 1.3? Why wouldn't I just tell you, hey, it's a really hot house. Tell you what, if you put in 1.5 right now, it's yours, and you don't have to wait. You can do it right now. Remember, I represent the seller when I have a listing. So by having a buyer's agent, you have somebody between yourself and the seller's agent to actually negotiate that for you. And you don't have to deal directly with the seller's agent. You have somebody on your team that is going for your best interest. Another thing too is that because a buyer's agent represents your interest, oftentimes we're negotiating for better prices. Oftentimes we have resources that you might not know of. Like, for instance, I might have a lender that is better than the rest. You might have some issues, getting qualified for a loan, but I might, actually I do, I have a lot of lenders that I know of that for different situations might be better or worse. So instead of you calling around 10 different lenders to try to get the best deal, I can say, oh, you know what? That's a TIC. You know what? I know a guy who does TICs, and you don't have to call 10 different lenders to see if they do TICs. I can do that. I can give that information because I'm a buyer's agent. So that's, again, part of that value add. Also, there is that professional network. I don't have every single listing in San Francisco, but I do know a lot of people, and I can plug into that. I can plug into the people that I know. I can plug into the other agents that also have sold a lot of homes. They know the people who own the homes, and I can call them up and say, hey, Judy, once again, know anybody who's selling a fill in the blank? So I have that as a buyer's agent. It's one of my skills. We also know how to negotiate real estate. This is something that negotiation is a skill. And you want somebody on your side that's negotiating for you. Remember, if you go to the seller's agent, they're negotiating for the seller, not you. That's like going through a divorce and saying, hey, my future ex, can you let me talk to your attorney so that I can ask him what I should do for me in this situation? I would say that's a bad idea. So that's another reason why buyer's agents are very important. The other thing too is that as buyer's agents, or buyer's agents in general, we've gone through buying properties with people before. And so we know the emotional ups and downs that happen. At first you're like, oh, really excited because you want to buy. And then you write the offer and you're scared because you don't know if it's too much or too little, or it's the 7th written one you've offered. And you're excited because this could be the one. And then you get it, and you're excited and you're elated for like a day and a half. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh no, what did I just do? A little bit of buyer's remorse. Anyway, there's this roller coaster that happens every time. And it doesn't matter if you're buying a house or a nice pair of shoes or whatever. We all go through this roller coaster. And so to have somebody who can just emotionally walk you through it, explain things to you, that's another good reason to have a buyer's agent. So with this ruling, or with this, with this proposed settlement, is this good or bad for the buyer? Well, let's walk through. I would say there are positive and negative aspects to it. Positive aspect to it is that it is very transparent. Now, when somebody comes to me and says, hey, Tim, you know what? I love you. You're a cool dude. You know a lot about properties and you help my friend. And so I want to use you as an agent. I can simply say, cool, this is my fee, this is my services, here you go, sign this, and we are off to the races. No objections. That kind of transparency is great because it definitely helps me explain what I do and why I earn what I earn. So that's a big part. I love the transparency, and having that just crystal clear, I think is amazing. Also, I think it's positive because buyer's agents, it is nice to actually know that, okay, I am working with you. And if we have a contract in place and I know you're motivated, I know that I can give you my absolute full attention. But there are those instances where people might go from one agent to another agent to another agent. And, you can kind of tell. And even for me as an agent, it's like, am I going to be super committed to you when it really seems like you're shopping around and I'm going to be working with you for 3 months, and then, you go to an open house and then all of a sudden you disappear. Turns out you bought that house, you went straight to the seller. Well, this does prevent that. So for me, it makes me even more emotionally excited, and it makes me feel much more secure that when I'm working with you, I am working with you. And the motivation that I have, knowing that we are together in this and I'm going to get you the house that you want, to me, that's great. I think that's an amazing thing. So again, 2 good things. What about the negative sides? Buyer's agents won't be able to show homes without an agreement. So on the one side, if you're kind of a looky-loo and you are just trying to look at homes, it might, this is going to slow you down a bit, because buyer's agents are going to want to have that contract in place before we show you homes. So it will slow down that aspect of it. It'll be harder just to like, we'll just say, go see a home at a random point, but that's okay. It just means that there's a little bit more work to be done, and you might need to be a little bit more serious before going and viewing a home. This is kind of, to me, a big negative impact, is that home buyers who've never gone through the process before, those are the ones who really need an agent because they've never done this before. And also, usually those are the ones that are just saving to try to get that, 10% or 20% down. And then on top of that, usually in transactions, there's about 3% of fees just with transfer taxes and mortgage points and title and da-da-da. And then on top of that, to have to pay their buyer's agent on top of that, now they need an extra, whatever is negotiated, we'll just say between 2 and 3% to pay for their buyer's agent. So it puts a lot more burden on the buyers, at least in theory, and we'll get to that later. But for those first-time home buyers that are struggling just to get together the money that they need to do what they want to do, like, this can be a major burden, and it might actually price out a lot of people that are just barely starting to get into the home ownership life. The biggest companies here are going to have a great advantage here. So this is a big win for big companies. The big ones are going to get bigger. The Zillows, the Redfins, the one that just have super deep pockets and big websites and huge team of attorneys and huge team of everything. They're probably going to get bigger because they're going to squash out a lot of the little guys who don't have that pull. So this is a huge win for the big companies. Overall, I'd say in general, for the home buyers, I would say it's the worst thing for the first-time home buyers. It adds another layer of complexity. It potentially adds more cost. It also potentially reduces the homes that they're going to be able to see. There's a lot of negative things for the first-time home buyers. But for the experienced home buyers, maybe it's okay if you already know the neighborhood, if you already know how to negotiate, if you've already gone through this, if you're a professional, if you're an attorney, maybe you can knock off a couple points, when you go to buy, because you don't need an agent because you already know how to negotiate. So, I would say overall, the newer you are to the real estate market, the harder this is going to hit you. Okay. Is it a good thing for the consumer on the sell side? Well, again, positive. Transparency is great. Transparency is always good news. It will also give that conversation to the seller of, this is exactly where the money goes, this is exactly how it's spent, and this is how it is. Negative is if they don't offer compensation to the selling agent, they will have a smaller buyer pool because there's going to be less eyes on the property. Less eyes on the property, less price. It is going to get less. Just statistically, the less people that see it, the less people are going to make offers on it, and the lower of a chance you'll get that somebody is willing to pay a higher price. So if the sellers decide that they are not going to offer any kind of concessions, which they can still do, I'll talk about that later. But if they decide that they don't want to offer any concessions to the buy-side agent, their buyer pool is going to be smaller, and that will definitely affect negatively the final sales price. The other thing is that offers are going to be more confusing because you might have two offers that are both $1 million, but one of them says, I want a seller credit to pay for my buyer, and one of them says, I'll pay for my buyer myself. Or maybe one of them says, I want to go a little bit above that, and need some credits. Some say, well, I want to go under it, but I don't want to pay for it, but I'll pay for it myself. And so now you have to kind of weigh out who's paying for what. That becomes just a little bit more complicated. But again, there is nothing stopping from sellers to offering a concession or a closing credit to help a buyer pay for their buyer's representation. Another big thing is that selling commissions might not even go down. And I know that was a big thing. And I know in the news, I saw this a lot where like, oh, now commissions are going to be reduced in half and sellers are going to save all this money. I don't think that is a fact, because when you cut out the buyer's agent, what ends up happening is the seller has to do a lot more work. And so if you burden that person selling your house with a lot more work, because now they're having to deal with every single person who thinks that they want to write an offer on the house, you might have just 10x'd the number of people that they have to interact with to sell your home. And guess what? We have costs too. We have offices we need to pay for. We've got computers. We've got video equipment. We have secretaries. We have a lot of expenses as well. And so now if we have to start hiring people to show homes and all this stuff, and it actually, people might not actually lower their commissions because their costs are now going up. So the sellers might still pay around the same commission and then also have to give a credit to the buyer's agent to make the deal work. So really time will tell if anybody saves money out of this. My thought is that the overall commission might actually go up, because if on the sell side, they charge a little bit more to cover all the extra expenses that they have, and the buyer's agent, there's this thing in economics called sticky pricing. We have our entire business model around, whatever our current rates are. And it's going to be very difficult to lower our rates from what they are, because we already have our businesses in place. And, just like anything else, it's very hard to go down in price unless we're firing people and reducing our services. And, I'm just saying it might not actually go down. So is this good or bad for the industry? I'm going to say overall, it's kind of neutral. You got some wins because, again, the transparency I love. I can have this conversation. I can now look you straight in the eye and have a reason to tell you, look, as a buyer's agent, this is what I do for you and this is what I charge. Now, we can always ask the seller to cover your fee, but either way, this is my fee. So I can still do that. So that's kind of nice. And as a buyer's agent, it was always recommended to do that, but it also scared away a lot of people. So now that it'll be mandatory to kind of have this conversation, I actually think that's good. Okay. Buyer's agents will also become more efficient because they will be contractually obligated to that person, and they don't have to work with people who aren't necessarily serious buyers. So, if they don't want to sign a contract, if they don't want to work with you, then you're going to have less people that you're actively working with. So I would say for the buyer's agents, they will have less people in the air, because a lot of them will fade away as soon as you say, hey, I need you to sign this contract. On the sell side, the seller's agents will have a lot of explaining to do in terms of how the buyer's agents get paid, and if it's okay to pay them or to even give seller credits for a buy-side commission or, a buy-side cooperative agent fee. So that will be, they've got a lot more explaining to do of exactly where their money goes. Very large firms are going to benefit. As I said, they will basically become their own MLS. Zillow is already marching to try to make their own monopoly. If you've ever been to Zillow and clicked on their call an agent, here's what they did. They just sold your information for hundreds, if not thousands of dollars, or they gave it to another agent who has already promised to give them a huge chunk of that commission. So they, with their money, they're going to get bigger. Zillow probably loves this because it gives them such a competitive advantage. And I can see this. I can see a scenario where this gets a little out of hand with Zillow. Small firms, they're really going to suffer, especially like new agents. A typical career progression for an agent is you're first a buyer's agent, and then those buyers become your sellers, and then you're a seller's agent. And that's kind of the way it goes. So now if you try to cut off all the buyer's agents from getting into the market, you're really just going to have a few of those over time with nobody coming in. You're really cutting that off. So you're going to see much less new people entering with their agents. And just so you know, right now the success rate for a new agent is less than 80%. Most of the people who get their license and start becoming an agent, they only last about 3 years. Only 20% last more than 3 years. So it's already a hard industry to begin with. So in conclusion, who knows how this is going to change? It could be just semantics. It could be that instead of having a cooperative agent fee, there is just a credit to buyer at closing to pay for their fee. So that's a very real possibility. Another thing is that Zillow might, do what they can to make an even bigger play. So they might grow. So is it good? Is it bad? I don't know. I think time will tell. But in the meantime, I think it is a good thing because I will be able to be much more transparent about what I do, because a lot of people don't know. My friends, my family, people who contact me, people I meet, they don't know what a buyer's agent does. And so this is a great way to explain them what I do, what my fee is, and what they get out of that. So that's a wrap for me. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to reach out. My contact information, as always, is in the description below. And, feel free to watch the rest of my videos. I do a lot of neighborhood tours here in San Francisco and some building tours and stuff like that. So watch, enjoy. Hope you've enjoyed it. Again, Tim Farnham, Black Label Real Estate. We'll talk to you later.